So this sounded fake at first, but there's actually a concrete reason people think Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen could be returning on Switch or Switch 2. And this isn't just about rumors. Over the last year, the gaming industry has followed a very specific pattern when it comes to legacy re-releases and franchise anniversaries, and Nintendo fits that pattern almost too well. And what's even more interesting is how Nintendo and the Pokemon Company appear to be positioning these potential releases, because that strategy is exactly why the community can't agree on whether this is exciting or a red flag. And once you see the full picture, you'll understand why this conversation is way more complicated than just bring the old games back. So today, let's jump right in here and take a look at this article. Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen may be returning on Switch 2 for 30th anniversary. A popular Pokemon leaker claims that Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen will be released on the Nintendo Switch 2 soon. However, is it a remake or a port? Here is everything we know about the Gen 1 Kanto games that will reportedly be announced at Pokemon Day 2026. We are now only weeks away from Pokemon Day 2026, and the leaks keep on coming. As you know by now, this year's annual event is a big deal as it's the Pokemon 30th anniversary. However, according to one infamous leaker, Game Freak is planning on re-releasing Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen on the Switch 2. This latest update comes straight from Riddler Koo, who revealed the leak in a February 11th post on Twitter, or X as they call it these days. Quote, "They will return soon." However, it's currently unclear whether 1, the games are new Switch 2 ports, 2, they are full remakes, or 3, whether or not they will be added to the Nintendo Switch Online as digital downloads. However, we also see that Central Leaks over on Twitter shared that further information from a different leaker. So we have another source here saying that these will be eShop paid releases, not part of Nintendo Switch Online, and they will also have home compatibility. Now, later in this video, we're going to go over sort of the good and the bad about this leak, and there's a lot to talk about, okay? But the article goes on to say, more importantly, the leak also claims that FireRed and LeafGreen will have Pokemon home compatibility. If true, this news is huge. It means players will be able to transfer their Pokemon caught in the retro games over to their modern Pokemon titles. This was shared by the Hidden Power podcast over on Twitter. But how credible is this leak actually, right? I think that's what a lot of people are curious to know. The Gen 1 Pokemon remakes were originally released in 2004 on the Game Boy Advance. They sure were. I still got them, baby. Given that it's the Pokemon 30th anniversary, it would make sense to revisit the games that started it all. Now, let me just be clear here. These games were not the start of Pokemon, but they're in Kanto. They're the remakes of the start of the franchise, okay? And so yes, it does make sense that for the 30th anniversary, we're going back to the region that started it all. And I think a lot of people would agree that FireRed and LeafGreen are the better way to go through Kanto, right? I mean, there are the purists that love red, blue, and yellow, and don't get me wrong, those were great for their time. But I think even as someone who, you know, my first ever Pokemon game was the yellow version, okay, on the Game Boy Color, I love red, blue, yellow, but I mean, FireRed and LeafGreen, like that is clearly the way that you want to play through Kanto if you're going to play through Kanto again, right? And I know there's Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, but those are like Pokemon Go mechanics. It's like, it's not the same thing. It's very much a different experience, okay? So I do think that, you know, despite the other options, I think FireRed and LeafGreen are the actual best way to revisit Kanto, so this does make sense. Now, as far as whether the leak is credible or not, Riddler Koo is pretty much the gold standard for Pokemon leaks. The insider has been posting leaked Pokemon information accurately for almost a decade now. In fact, I can't recall a time he's ever been wrong or posted incorrect information. If Riddler Koo is saying something is going to happen, it's more than likely going to happen. So this is big news, ladies and gentlemen. But the article goes on to say, there's a little bit of a bonus here, Pokemon Black and White may also be returning. Interestingly, another account actually leaked the Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen re-release a week before Riddler Koo. However, what makes this leak more intriguing is that it also claimed Pokemon Black and White would be another classic Pokemon game returning for the 30th anniversary celebration. And then they share again another post from the Hidden Power podcast here saying a seemingly credible source has posted a riddle for Pokemon Day. What do you think this means? means. Could this be hinting at ports or some type of new Pokemon? And the riddle, if you can't read it here, says Hannah is sad. She just got the news. Her favorite songs, Red by Taylor Swift and Green by Cavetown, are no longer part of the streaming service, and she will have to pay to play them. And her third favorite song, Black by Pearl Jam, is only available on the latest iPhone. So this is obviously them pointing to the fact that Pokemon Red, or I should say Fire Red and Leaf Green, are not going to be on the Nintendo Switch Online. You'll have to buy them separate. And also Black and White are only going to be on the Switch too. Now this also kind of lines up with what we've heard recently about DS games potentially coming to the Switch 2, just in the same way as GameCube games, for example, are only on the Switch 2. You're not going to play those older classic GameCube games on the original Switch. You need a Switch 2 for that, and so the DS is probably going to follow suit in the same way, which is definitely unfortunate for people who have not made the jump, because the Switch 2 is quite expensive, especially as a machine that's going to be playing just older games, right? But we'll talk more about money in a second, because that's a big part of the leaks here, okay? But as far as I can tell, this is the third source of this Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green leak, right? First we have Riddler Coup, secondly we have this riddle, and then third we have whoever CentroLeaks talked to. Now it could just be these two, right? But it seems like there's at least two, if not three, leakers talking about Fire Red and Leaf Green coming to the Switch or Switch 2. Okay, so when could this be announced? Obviously we are looking at the Pokemon Day 2026, which is February 27th. Okay, so we are just 2 weeks away from hearing potentially more information about this, and this has a lot of people talking. Okay, so I want to talk about why this announcement or this rumor, this leak, has divided the Pokemon community, and we're going to do the good and the bad. And real quick, this video is not sponsored, but I did just want to take a moment to thank you guys who continue to like the videos and use the new hype feature, because I just found out that you recently hyped one of my videos to be number 84 in the entire United States, and honestly that's insane that you guys keep doing this. So just know that all of your support is not going unnoticed, and I genuinely appreciate it. So once again, thank you guys, and if you made it this far into the video, consider dropping a thumbs up down below. The first thing that I want to touch on is if you look at the price of these games on price charting, okay, Fire Red loose, a loose copy is between $135 and $150 right now. Okay, you'll see the latest sale was actually $160, but you'll see some of these go for as little as $120. So on average you're looking at about $145 just for the cartridge. Okay, that's just for the actual cart, and if you're looking for complete, that's about a $400 game. Brand new is about $1,000. Okay, if we pop over to Leaf Green, it's not much better. It's $125 on average. Complete is $514, and brand new is again around $1,000. Okay, now this is an insane amount of money to play Pokemon Fire Red or Leaf Green on official Nintendo hardware, and that's one of the good things about these games coming to the Switch or Switch 2, is that you are going to be able to play them again for way cheaper than whatever this is. Okay, now I know a lot of you are sailing the high seas these days, okay, but a lot of people don't want to do that. They just don't want to do it. They don't want to take the risk. They don't want to download files from the internet or whatever the case might be, whether it's moral or legal or whatever. Okay, they don't want to do that. So no matter what it costs to play Fire Red or Leaf Green on the Switch or Switch 2, it's definitely going to be less than $150. Okay, and so one of the good things about this is that you're going to get to play the original Fire Red Leaf Green on official Nintendo hardware in 2026 for way cheaper than what it would cost to buy the actual cartridges. So that is awesome. On top of that, according to the leaks, these games will have Pokemon Home support, right? So you can play through them, and you can, you know, maybe complete the Pokedex and then transfer them over to Pokemon Home, and then later this year or whenever Gen 10 comes out, right, you can take that Charizard from your Fire Red and bring it into the latest Pokemon games. And I think that Pokemon Home support is great, because even though this is a digital release, or allegedly, we don't really know, we'll talk about that in a second, actually, it kind of gives a little bit more permanence to your progress, because you can carry those Pokemon up through different generations, right, which I think is really cool. Now beyond that, not only is this a legal way to play Pokemon Fire FireRed LeafGreen on official hardware, you're also going to be able to play it on your television, which is actually huge, because if you want to play FireRed or LeafGreen on your TV right now, you need a GameCube with the GameCube player attachment, which is a separate piece of hardware, and that thing is extremely expensive as well. The player with startup disc right now loose is about $155 on top of the cost of a GameCube, which is also about $120. Okay, I know sometimes you can get them for less, but I mean, you can see how quickly the price adds up here. If you want to play FireRed or LeafGreen on your television, you're looking at hundreds and hundreds of dollars, right? And so the fact that we are getting this, whether it's on the Switch or Switch 2, you can dock it and play it on your TV. That's also fantastic, because again, it's going to be the cheapest way to do that, and it's going to be on a flat screen TV, so it's not going to be like the GameCube, right? Doesn't have HDMI, you know, so that's a whole other like thing you have to think about. Even if you bought all of the actual hardware, like now you got to convert it to your modern TV. And the last sort of like good thing that I want to touch on here with this potential release, again, it is a leak or a rumor, we don't know for sure, and this one is I'm you know, a little bit tongue-in-cheek here, okay? I'm being a little bit obnoxious with this. If FireRed and LeafGreen comes to the Nintendo Switch, then the Nintendo Switch will finally have a good Pokemon game, right? The Nintendo Switch has been out since 2017, and release after release have been quite bad, okay? And I know I'm probably angering some people. I know that you guys might like Legends Arceus or whatever, right? But like, let's just be honest here for a second, okay? Even if you like some of the games on the Switch, pretty much everyone would agree that FireRed and LeafGreen are better games, right? Just straight up, you know it, I know it, everyone knows it. Even if you like some of the Switch games, these are better, okay? And like, again, I know I'm pissing some people off here, I know maybe you don't want to hear it, but like, I would be excited for the Switch to finally get a good Pokemon game. Okay, forgive me. Let's move on to sort of the bad part about this, okay? And this is why the Pokemon community, or I should say maybe more casual Nintendo fans, are sort of divided on this, right? Because the diehards, they're going to defend this, they're going to buy this no matter what, but there are people that are upset about this, right? And why is this? Well, according to the leaks, this is not going to be part of the subscription service, right? Now, Nintendo Switch Online is, I think it's like $4 a month plus tax, or $20 for a whole year, okay? So it's a very cheap subscription service, but people who bought that whole thing, but let's say they bought a whole year for 20 bucks, they bought it with the expectation that they're going to get access to all of the games that come out for the game libraries that are already there. So for those of you that don't know, the Nintendo Switch Online subscription gives you access to a bunch of NES games, Super Nintendo games, Game Boy games, and if I'm not mistaken, to play the Game Boy Advance games, you actually need the expansion pack version of Nintendo Switch Online, which is I think $50 a year for an individual, right? And so people may have bought these subscription services with the expectation that, okay, not only do I get the current library, but I'm going to get everything that they add that come for these consoles, right? And according to these leaks, these games will not be part of that subscription service. And so it kind of feels like a spit in the face to the customers that are the most loyal to Nintendo. I mean, they've already given them money here, and they expect to get Game Boy Advance games for their Game Boy Advance subscription. And yet here we see, and again, this is a leak, it's a rumor, maybe this isn't how it's going to be, but we see that they are likely or possibly going to be releasing standalone titles not part of that subscription service. And the reason for that is very clear. They want to upcharge those that are already paying, right? If they put it on there and people are already subscribed, then they're not going to make any more money. Now they would get more subscriptions, and especially if they do the yearly plan, a lot of people are going to forget and they're going to get recharged for it next year, and that's another $50 that they make off of it. So I really think Nintendo should consider doing that. I think they actually would make more money in the long run if they did that. But anyway, I can see why that would upset people, right? It definitely rubs me the wrong way that, you know, you've sort of set this expectation for your customers, and when the most popular and beloved game that could possibly come to that service finally gets announced, it's like, just kidding, you have to pay separate for that, right? Which doesn't feel good at all. Now, on top of that, let's talk about what these possibly could cost as standalone games, okay? Because Central Leaks actually posted a poll over on their Twitter asking people how much they think FireRed or LeafGreen will cost each if re-released on the eShop with home compatibility, and a majority of people, more than 50% of people, think that these games will cost $30 each. Okay, each. Now again, everything we're talking about in this video is leaks and rumors and it's not confirmed, but I have also heard from various sources that they are going to be $30. So whether that's true or not, I have no idea, but maybe it's, you know, $30 each, or, you know, $40 for the two of them, right? That would make sense. They would make even more money that way. I could totally see them doing something like that. But when you think about paying $30 for a port of a 20-year-old game, it's kind of insane, right? Because if you guys remember back to the 3DS, they did the same thing for the 20th anniversary for Pokemon. If you guys don't remember, on the 20th anniversary, they released Red, Blue, and Yellow to the 3DS eShop, and they were $10 a piece. And guess what? At that time, those games were 20 years old. And how old is FireRed and LeafGreen? 22 years old. Okay, so to celebrate the same anniversary in the same strategy, they're releasing the games in the same fashion, but they're doing it for 3 times the price, allegedly, right? Assuming it's $30, we don't actually know. And again, that is kind of wild, right? They have anchored the price of these ports, these sort of digital ports for these older Pokemon games at $10, and now the next one is potentially 30, you know. And again, I can understand that there's definitely a quality difference when we look at Red, Blue, Yellow versus FireRed and LeafGreen. We're talking about 2 different generations of system, right? But is it really 3 times more? Like, I could see it going from 10 to 15, right, just from inflation alone, or maybe 10 to 20, but 10 to 30 feels like a big jump for a port, unless it's actually a remaster, like unless they actually do a remaster. But I'll talk maybe a little bit more about that in just a second. Now, another thing people are getting upset about when it comes to this sort of leak or rumor is that some people are sick of going back to Kanto. And like, look, I can understand where they're coming from, especially when there are regions that don't get as much love as they should, right? I mean, of course, Black and White, lots of people want a remaster for that, which we did touch on earlier. It could be coming, a re-release could be coming, but the fact of the matter is that the best-selling games in the franchise are Red, Blue, and Yellow. And when you look at the peak of Pokemon popularity, it was between 1998 and 2000. That was Pokemania in the United States, and what games were around back then? It's Kanto. So am I sick of going back to Kanto? No, I'm not. And are they going to stop going back to Kanto? No, they're not. It's going to keep printing money, but I can understand why people are upset. And really, I think a Heart Gold Soul Silver port would have made even more sense, because first of all, for the 20th is when they released Red, Blue, Yellow, so you've already celebrated going back to Kanto. For the 30th, you should do the generation after that, which by the way also features Kanto, right? Like you go through Johto and then you go through Kanto after. Like it kind of is 2 birds 1 stone there. So I think that would have been probably the better play, but maybe they just weren't ready with the DS on the eShop or something. I don't know. But I mean, really, when you ask Pokemon to stop going back to Kanto, that's kind of like saying, hey, why don't you just change the mascot away from Pikachu and make it Pawmi, right? Like it's just not gonna happen. It doesn't matter. I know Pikachu's old, but like why would they do that? Another thing that, you know, might rub people the wrong way is that it seems like these are digital re-releases, right? There's not going to be a physical version of this re-release, at least from what we know from these rumors. Okay, and let's just get one thing out of the way here, and let's make this very clear. Re-releasing FireRed and LeafGreen is a move that you make if what you want to do is target nostalgia. Okay, all you have to do is look at the commercials for the Pokemon Lego sets that they just announced, or you look at the recent commercial that they aired during the Super Bowl and the celebrities that they used, and it's very obvious that they are targeting the older demographic, the people that are 30 years old and older. Okay, that's who they're targeting right now, because these games are 22 years old, and so you have to be a bit older to even want to buy these. Right now, I know some young people are gonna, you know, they really love the franchise, they go back and play it, I get that, but a majority of people that are going to enjoy FireRed and LeafGreen are not kids, right? I know Lady Gaga in the commercial, she's mega famous, right? But she's not necessarily mega famous among 7-year-olds. Okay, she's mega famous amongst my generation, the 30-year-olds. Okay, all that to say, them not releasing a physical release here is kind of them leaving money on the table, right? Because the older demographic is the demographic that likes physical media the most. The 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, we are the ones fans that love physical media, and a lot of people, maybe they don't have their original cartridges anymore, but they would love to have a Nintendo Switch or Switch 2 cartridge with both of these games on the physical cartridge, no game key card nonsense. Okay, and they could have it on their shelf, or maybe there's a collector's edition or something along those lines. And like, look, I hate scalpers. I hate what scalpers are doing to the Pokemon card community. Okay, so I don't want to see any artificial scarcity here, but if they did release a sort of physical copy of this, it could be a cool collector's edition. Right now, print enough for everybody that wants one, and don't make it a limited time thing like the 3D All-Stars they did on the Switch. Do this right, and a lot of people will be happy, and I think they could print a lot more money if they did that. Right, again, let's say it's $30 a piece, or they do a physical bundle for $40. I think a lot of people will buy it. Throw in a steel book and an art book, and I could easily see people paying $50 $60 for this thing, which is crazy to think about, but it would sell. And I feel like they are leaving money on the table not doing that, especially when you look at the prices of Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I mean, that just kind of proves it, right? I mean, that people will spend on this thing if it's physical. I know this is a remake and that's kind of not, it's different, but that's, you get my point here. Okay, furthermore, and this is kind of another thing that is rubbing people the wrong way about this announcement, and that is the fact that there are some people, like the article we checked, saying that this will be a Switch 2 exclusive. Okay, and if that is the case, that is absolutely bullshit, because we know that the Nintendo Switch is perfectly capable of running Game Boy Advance games, right? I mean, what are we talking about? It is much more powerful than a Game Boy Advance. Obviously it can do that. And really, when you take a step back and you think about this logically, right, the install base of the original Switch is massive. It's like 155 million people. Okay, and so when you think about, okay, let's assume that these games are $30 a piece. Obviously what they would want to do is charge $30 to the biggest possible install base and just make a boatload of money. They will literally print money doing that, right? I can absolutely see them doing it and putting it on the original Switch. However, okay, if we look at the behavior of Nintendo and the Pokemon company lately over the last year, I would say maybe year and a half, they've been moving different. Okay, they've been acting real scummy, and a lot of people have picked up on it, and there's been a lot of backlash on the internet as a result of that. I could absolutely see a world where they say, okay, you know what, actually this is a Switch 2 exclusive, not because there's hardware limitations, but just because we want more sales. We just want more people to buy the Switch 2, right? That's really it. That's all it is. They could easily lock this to the Switch 2 and piss off a bunch of people, but a lot of people will look at that and say, okay, well, there's another reason for me to get a Switch 2. Finally, I'm going to pull the trigger, right? I could easily see them doing that, even though I think realistically the most logical and smartest business play would be to make it available to the masses, to the largest install base. That's how they're going to make the most money. It could possibly be a Switch 2 exclusive, and that would piss me off for sure. And the final thing that has people upset about this sort of leak or rumor is that this is kind of another way that the fans are going to reward Pokemon, Game Freak, and Nintendo for being lazy and for relying on past successes, while their most recent releases have not reached a sort of quality bar that people would expect out of a $60 or $70 game. Let's just be honest here, the most recent releases have been disappointing for a lot of people, and I know everyone kind of points at the sales of Scarlet and Violet, and they're like, oh, those are some of the best selling Pokemon games they've ever released, right? And like, look, that's true, but sales numbers and quality are not mutually exclusive. So let me give you an example. How many hamburgers does McDonald's sell a year? It's like 1 billion hamburgers a year or something insane like that, right? And no one's gonna sit there and say, okay, yeah, they sell 1 billion of them because the quality is there. It's like, no, that's not how that works, right? So just in the same way, just because the game sells a ton of copies doesn't necessarily mean that it is high quality. It just means a lot of people wanted to buy that particular product. And really all it takes is 2 seconds to look at these games, right? Scarlet and Violet, I mean, what are we talking about? Look at the frame rate, look at the textures, look at the open world that is completely empty of anything to do. The only thing that solves some of those problems is playing it on a Switch 2, which is a $500 upgrade, right? It's insane. And so when we look at that, and then we look at Legends CA, which is like arguably the same or worse, right? I mean, like that map is tiny and they still couldn't have textures on buildings. Like, what year is it? Is it the 90s? Are we still in the 90s, right? You know, and so when we look at the low quality of the recent Pokemon releases and how many people have been disappointed by those low quality releases, and then they turn around and they announce, hey, guess what, this is coming back, it's $30, everyone who buys them is like, you're kind of rewarding the company that just keeps spitting in your face, right? Even if you like these games, and even if you're willing to pay to play them again, you know, it just feels bad to support the companies that just aren't giving you anything good that is new new. They're just re-releasing and relying on the older stuff, right? And that's assuming that this is, you know, kind of a lazy port, right? And, you know, when we look at actual remakes and actual remasters, I'm on the fence about that as well, because you look at Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and those remakes were horrible. Literally, I don't think I've seen anyone disagree with that, right? Like, actually they're bad. Like, they're actually bad at remakes, to the point where, and I haven't seen other people talk about this, so I don't know if it's just me, my Pro controller has input lag for only those games. It blows my mind. I don't know how that's possible, but the D-pad has like half a second of input delay for Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and it drives me absolutely mad. It is actually unplayable. I actually stopped playing because I could not stand the fact that the D-pad and what my character was doing on the screen just wasn't the same. And I'm like, how is this even possible? This is official hardware with an official Pro controller. I'm losing my mind. No, I'm not playing with a joystick. Those games were not played with a joystick originally. It's crazy. Okay. And maybe it's a personal problem, but like, I've tried 3 times to play those remakes and I can't do it. And on top of that, what makes it worse is that FireRed and LeafGreen are fantastic remakes. Heart Gold, Soul Silver are some of the best remakes, not just in Pokemon, but in gaming in general. And that same sort of fondness is looked back upon with Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Those were insanely good remakes, right? Because both those and Heart Gold and Soul Silver were faithful to the original, brought it up to the modern day, and then added a bunch of cool content that wasn't fluff. It was actually cool content, actually new things to do, right? And so they were mind-blowing how good those remakes were. And then you look at, you know, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and it's like, those are garbage, right? And so then when we look at, okay, well, what would you do if they remade FireRed and LeafGreen? It's like, well, you know, is it going to be the same as Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl? Because if it is, I'm not interested. I don't want to buy it. Okay, if you're gonna do it right. And I don't have faith in Ilka or whatever the name is to actually do this properly. And so it would just be another disappointment, right? But all of that to say, when we look at the gaming industry as a whole, it seems like everybody is actually going backwards. And this re-release, or this rumor of the re-release of FireRed and LeafGreen, is just the next point on the graph to prove that the entire industry is going in that direction. So let's take a look here. All the biggest game franchises are going backwards. Halo, Splinter Cell, Max Payne, and now God of War are all going backwards with remakes instead of new games. One of the biggest announcements made during Sony's first PlayStation State of Play of the Year wasn't a brand new game or a new entry in a popular franchise. It was instead a small teaser for a remake of the original God of War trilogy. This is just the latest example of a big series going backwards, and more proof that big publishers are getting more and more risk adverse, even with some of the most popular franchises around. Last year, Xbox announced that Halo Studios is remaking the original Halo Combat and Evolved, and it will launch in 2026 on Xbox, PC, and PS5. Microsoft has promised more Halo games in the future, but it is very telling that after a few misfires, Xbox is running back to the safety of the first game for its next big project. Fans have been waiting for a new Splinter Cell game for a very long time, but instead Ubisoft is working on a remake of the original game. When will this remake launch? Unclear, and considering how many games Ubisoft has recently canceled, including a remake of the first Prince of Persia game released on PS2, I'm not confident that the Splinter Cell remake will even happen. Max Payne is a series that hasn't received a new game since Rockstar's Max Payne 3 back in 2012, so it's disappointing that the next Max Payne project officially in development isn't Max Payne 4 or an interesting spin-off, but instead a remake of the first 2 games being developed by series creators Remedy Entertainment. Tomb Raider is also getting a full remake of its first game later this year in the form of Tomb Raider Legacy of Atlantis. This one is especially annoying because there already exists a remake of the first game Anniversary, which was released in 2007. I'd also toss the upcoming Gears of War game E-Day on this pile. Sure, it isn't a remake, but it is a prequel starring the original characters from the first game, Marcus and Dom, and it looks to be entirely focused on recapturing the nostalgic feelings of gamers who played the OG game 20 years ago on 360. We also recently saw Gears of War Reloaded released on the PlayStation 5, which right now apparently is $20, which is literally just a remaster of the original. And of course we have to consider how successful last year's Oblivion remaster / remake was, so it's not surprising publishers are continuing on in this direction. And it's not just the fact that they're remaking old games, it's the fact that these remakes are selling extremely well. Oblivion was one of the best-selling games last year, so the re-release of FireRed and LeafGreen would be surprising to nobody. In fact, this is like just the natural next step of what we should expect of gaming in 2026. I mean, they will literally just print money. And no matter what people say, no matter how much backlash there is, whether there is backlash or not, I don't know. Could be the case that these are beloved remakes or ports or whatever the case is, but everyone knows they're going to print money here, right? I mean, if it's 30 bucks a piece, they are going to make at least $30 million profit at just immediately. It won't even be close, right? If not significantly more than that, you know what I mean? And so with the entire industry going in this direction, it's really no surprise that we are seeing potentially the re-release of FireRed and LeafGreen in 2026. But I want to know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. Are you excited for this potential re-release? Are you unhappy about this? And what do you think it's going to cost? And do you think it's worth that price? Let me know in the comment section below. And while you're down there, consider dropping a thumbs up on the video since you've made it all the way to the end. It really helps out the channel a ton. And you might think you're subscribed because you've seen a ton of my videos, but you're actually not. Double check down below.